Best way for me to take care of my well-being instead of sitting in resentment, let's renegotiate. I have to make a decision for my life. Burnout doesn't happen to a person by the company. It happens to a person because they're not speaking up. Blame is the opposite of personal responsibility. You're not responsible for my life. I am. But we don't do enough education and training to teach people these things.
Welcome to the Optimized Workplace. On today's episode, we're joined by John Toomey, an international speaker, writer, thought leader with an impressive background in high-performance sports and corporate wellness. John's expertise spans professional Australian rules football, Olympic coaching, and the corporate culture development. He currently serves as the global chair of the Global Wellness Institute's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. Our topic for today is bridging the gap between high-performance sports strategies. We just came off the Olympics, so everyone's thinking about that, right? And workplace wellness. And what are the biggest challenges companies face when implementing wellness programs? So first off, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fran. It's really good to be here. Really good.
Well, thank you very much. For those of you who are not watching us via YouTube, John is actually speaking with me from Australia. So he is doing us a great favor here at the Optimized Workplace. It's very early in the morning there, but I really appreciate you being with us, John. So as we shape this conversation and kick it off, as being the chair of the Global Wellness Institute, an amazing organization doing some incredible work, I'd love you to share a little bit about that work and how your experience in professional sports pretty much shapes your approach to how you're thinking about workplace wellness today.
That's a big question, but it's a really good question, and thank you. And by the way, everybody, that's beautiful Melbourne behind me. Stunning city of about 5 million people, the southerly-most large city on the planet. So with the Global Wellness Institute, it's an amazing organisation based in Miami, and it's really emerged as sort of the preeminent body for the dissemination of evidence-based wellness information, trends, strategies, etc. that do great work. And I got involved back in about 2015, and they have a number of specific initiatives that are designed to stretch the influence and the connection of the Institute out into the various areas of well-being, whether it be spas, workplace wellness, hot springs, cancer treatments. There's 33 different initiatives. Mm-hmm. And for the last 5 years, I've been heavily involved in the Workplace Wellbeing Initiative, and our aim has been to try to support that industry to expand its influence, because, the global wellness marketplace is worth $5.6 trillion. Now, that's up nearly $2 trillion in the last 2 years since the pandemic, which is amazing.
That's
so it's a very fast, rapidly growing. And the thing that's always bothered me is when you look at the bubbles on the map of the size of the various sectors, mm-hmm. Workplace wellbeing is way too small. So we've been really working to try and lift that up and really build it. And part of the strategy, I suppose, for the US market specifically is there is so much money spent on health insurance. Mm-hmm. So it's like creating a safety net there for people who get sick, but there's not enough money spent to help people learn what disease is all about and how to prevent themselves getting sick. So there's a lot of work being done in that space. Now, in terms of myself, I've got a very broad skill set in human well-being. That was really driven by my work in professional sport. For those of your listeners that don't know what Australian rules football is, some say it is the toughest sport in the world to condition an athlete for. And the reason for that is that the playing arena is oval-shaped, almost circular. It's over 200 yards long and 180 yards wide. Mm. There's 18 players per team on the field at any one time, and only 4 players on the interchange bench, so they can rotate off the bench. The game is really fast. There's no offside. The players are spread all over the field, and the ball travels either by kicking, handballing, which means punching the ball off your hand a bit like a volleyball serve, wow, or by running with the ball. And when you're running with the ball, you must bounce it every 15 minutes. So it's really high speed. The players travel, some of them run 16, 17, maybe 18 kilometres in a game. So converted to miles, that's somewhere between 9 and 11 miles in a game. But also there's no padding, and there's a lot of very high-speed collisions, heavy tackling, a lot of leaping and jumping, so that it's a very explosive power sport, but it's a high-endurance sport. And
Sounds a lot like
I,
a corporate athlete.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered in all of that is that there's every now and then you get this athlete that comes along who just does not match up to what our Western science textbooks tell us about athletes. The conditioning programs don't work for them. Either they break down too easily, or they have to do twice as much because they drop off really quickly. And so that forces you to then become more flexible in your thinking. You step outside the box. And eventually I started talking to Qigong masters and Wushu masters and yogis, which then led me into Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, which then led me into different philosophies of Hindu and Buddhism and Taoism, and starting to really explore the many, many different approaches to life and aspects of life. And so as you go, you start to get a deeper understanding of the capacity of the human body, the unlimited power of the human spirit, and also how the human mind can either be of benefit or a hindrance to performance. So all of that comes together. And then so when you step into the workplace, you come in with a profound appreciation for the diversity of people and how they are and what they need to help themselves really develop. Now, then you go back to sport, and you know that some people come into the system as young people. They've got incredible talent, but they don't have a lot of desire to achieve anything. And so oftentimes they don't make it. Then there's others who can't direct enough of their attention into their training, and they're doing too many other things, including partying maybe, and maybe they don't make it either.
Yeah.
And then you get the ones that come in who don't have as much talent as everybody else, but because their work ethic is so profound and their dedication to their goals is unwavering, they make it, you know?
Yeah.
And so then you come into the corporate arena and you've got all these different people, some really talented, some just hard workers. And so now
struggling just to keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we go, okay, so we've got a bunch of athletes here. They might not be running and crashing into people, but they want to dedicate their existence to perfecting themselves in this particular discipline. So we can support them.
That's very profound, very profound. I want to go back to something that you mentioned about, just the mental acuity and the human consciousness and how much that comes into play, especially with athleticism. Like if you look at, this big international landscape that we just concluded with the 2024 Olympics, and knowing the level of athleticism that it takes to compete at that level, top athletes of the world. You talked a little bit just a moment ago about the human consciousness component and how important it is to really have that mental focus and awareness and everything kind of going in the right direction at its peak. What role do you think that plays when it comes to performance, both in wellness and particularly wellness in the workplace?
There's an athlete that competed at this Olympics who I just love, and she blows my mind because she just won her fourth gold medal in a row in the same event. So it's 4 Olympics on the trot. And it's an awful, difficult, hard event. And her name is Katie Ledecky. She's American.
Yep.
And
Swimmer.
she's won the 800 meters.
Yep.
4 times.
She's amazing. That young lady is amazing.
Yeah. Could you imagine how many times she arrived at the swimming pool at 5 a.m. and thought, I just don't want to do this today? How many times did she have to overcome
Yeah.
all of the resistance that was rising up in her universe because she was just tired or she was bored with it or whatever. And so for 15 years,
Mhm.
she's kept that train moving to be the best of the best of the best. I want some of what she's got.
I think we all do. I think it's safe to say we
Yeah.
all do. But I think it's important what you just noted too is that people assume that elite athletes are like that all the time. They want to do it all the time. That's all they want to do. They are born wanting to eat right, wanting to exercise all the time, all of that. And it's not true. It
No.
takes training, it takes focus, it takes all of that. So please continue.
Yeah. And, especially swimming, because swimming's about the only three-dimensional activity human beings do. And so if swimmers just take 3 or 4 days off, they lose their technique.
Mm.
And it takes a while to get it back, so it's really significant. But human consciousness is a really interesting thing. And I had such a gift because I went into a meeting once in 2005, and there was a woman in the meeting. She was so present, she was so connected, and I just couldn't believe her presence. And when I left the meeting, I said to a person who took me to the meeting, whatever she's got, I want it. And I found out that this woman had done a lot of work through a series of courses that actually come out of the US. So I then registered for a course on the Gold Coast in Australia. It was a 9-day experiential program using incredible tools, exploring the functioning of human consciousness, using your own consciousness as a personal case study.
Oh my.
And
Oh
you
my.
and it's so powerful, and you integrate your life, and
Yeah.
as soon as that course finished, I went, oh my God, I've got to do more of this. So I went to Orlando, Florida, and did the master level training, and I've been back there many times, and I studied this work in depth, and I taught the work for many years. It was work created by an amazing gentleman called Harry Palmer. And the work's called the Avatar course, and it was named that before the movie. But anyway, it gives you an extraordinary understanding, and two of the things that are really unique about it is how we direct our attention and the role of our will in being able to direct our attention. So getting our attention under the control of our will.
Yeah.
So it's a lot about focus. And the problem is that, for example, if Katie Ledecky, she puts her attention on, I'm going to win a gold medal and I'm going to swim really well and my technique's going to be amazing. And if she keeps her attention on that, she produces results. But if she starts putting attention on how hard it is, or if she starts putting attention on, the Australian swimmers who are trying to knock her off,
Yeah.
then her attention's deviating away from her goal, and then she starts to resist her goal. And a really interesting part of workplace fatigue is that if you've decided, for example, to apply for a position, maybe you're an architect and there's a firm of architects that you want to work for because you've heard great things, and you do everything you can to go through the interviews and get that job because you want that job so badly. But then you get there and you find it's very challenging because the talent around you is incredible. And so then you start doubting yourself. And then you start resisting going to work, and your mental speak starts saying, maybe I should be in a smaller firm. This is a bit hard. I'm worried that I'm not going to cut it. So now you've got your attention on your limitations, not on where you want to go. And so then you start resisting the experience, and then you stop enjoying going to work. And it's all because you've got your attention on the wrong thing,
Absolutely.
Whereas if you bring it back and you go, right, this is a learning experience. These people are going to drag me up to their level. This is exciting. I'm about to grow. And you've got your attention on those things.
Yeah.
Then you start to flourish. Then you start looking forward to going to work. And then you start looking forward to feedback. So it's a really interesting thing about how we direct our attention, how we use our will, and in the process, exploring the beliefs that we hold that perhaps we didn't know that we hold that are not helpful,
That is powerful. It really is, because it's so often, I think people get caught up in the colloquial, it's my mindset or it's a person's will. And it really is so much more powerful than that, right? It really is about the training and the focus and how you're constantly training yourself, training your mind, training, your brain in terms of the direction that you want to go. That's kind of one of the things I'm taking from what you just said. So I really appreciate you sharing that. If you are enjoying this segment or any of the segments that you've heard thus far on the Optimized Workplace, please be sure to join us here below and just follow us on the Optimized Workplace. We really want to not only drive our viewers and listeners, but we also want to share it. So if there's others that like us, please here, join and listen, subscribe on a regular basis, but also share the podcast. We'd love to have you back. So let's switch gears a little bit because a lot of our listeners here at the Optimized Workplace really are practitioners, right? They really are trying to do the best for their set of employees. We have a lot of, I call them Chicos, but Chief Human Resource Officers or CEOs, COOs of lots of different fields and industries, and are really faced with this grappling situation of this, obviously hybrid, disparate, remote, you name it, workforce, really trying to get everybody rowing in the same direction around their culture, around their mental health and all of that. I wonder if there's like one or two or three things that you would share being a global chair of this incredible organization, of the way in which you look at a success of a corporate initiative. Let's face it, companies are doing soup to nuts these days, John. And when I started in the business in the 90s, if you had a gym, you were an amazing company on the block. But now it's a gym, it's a yoga sunroof, everybody's got a Fitbit, and then everybody's got Calm, and then, everybody's going to the best club in town. But people are still unhappy. Many are feeling very lonely. Mental health is at its highest. The numbers have not changed that much in the US in terms of persons who are not overweight, let's be honest. And so how can organizations, how can leaders really think about the success of their initiatives and how to measure success? What does success really look like when you're thinking about instituting a corporate wellness initiative of some sort?
I think the solutions are much simpler than we realize. Firstly, this challenge that organizations have now, getting their people to come back to the office. Some organizations really want their people back in the office. And then the people are saying, well, hang on a minute, it worked really well while we're in COVID, so I want to work from home. And there's legitimacy to that argument. How do you do it? I think that the smart companies will use the introduction of a 4-day work week as the lure to bring people back to the office. So in other words, you come back to the office full time and we'll give you a 4-day work week. I think that will be one solution. The second thing,
that's really good. I think my employees are like, Fran, did you hear that?
Yeah, exactly. And the second thing is it's about agreements, and we've forgotten what it means to actually make an agreement. I was talking about this last night because, when people are getting married these days, there seems to be so much attention on the outfits and the post-nuptial celebrations that we forget about the most important part is the solemn agreement the two people are making with each other during the wedding process. They're actually making a solemn agreement with each other about how they're going to conduct their lives and how they are going to be within that relationship. I mean, you look at people, the way they behave, you realised that they just glossed over that. They chose some fancy words and stood up on the altar and told a big fat lie, right? So it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But you see, in a workplace, for example, Fran, let's just say I was applying for a position with your company and you gave me a workplace contract and I read the contract and I see the conditions of the contract and I go, okay, so my part of this agreement is that I'm going to deliver those things that you've asked for. And your part of the agreement is you're going to give me somewhere to work and you're going to pay me a salary. That's our agreement. And somewhere in there, it says something about 40 hours per week. So 6 months down the track, I find I'm working 55 hours a week. There's something very wrong with our agreement. Either you haven't been honest with me or I'm not being honest with you about my effort whatever it is. But if I feel like I'm really working hard and I can't cope, and then I start feeling fearful to speak up to you because you might sack me, then I'm no longer honoring myself and our agreement's out of alignment. And the best way for me to take care of my well-being, instead of sitting in resentment and fear and resistance and being unhappy, the best thing I can do to you is say, Fran, I think we need to talk about our agreement because I don't think it's working. Let's renegotiate. So we can sit down and have an honest discussion. And then if I find that you're a person who's not very honorable and you're not really wanting to, well, maybe I don't want to work for you in the first place. But I have to decide. I have to make a decision for my life and stop putting the power in your hands and allowing whatever it is that you might be thinking to dictate my life.
That's incredible, John. So true. So true.
You see, burnout, I believe, doesn't happen to a person by the company. It happens to a person because they're not speaking up.
Oh, my goodness. Did everybody hear that? That was an incredible gem, because so often I tell my own team this, like, I can provide the best opportunities for you and I can provide the best workplace experience. But at the end of the day, if you don't communicate what's going on with your body, I can't read your physio. Only you can do that. So if you're working yourself to the bone and you're doing long hours and you're not taking your breaks and you're not eating well and you're not sleeping well and you don't communicate that, you can't blame that on your boss. You can't blame that on your employer. That's on you. That is so powerful, John.
And there's one thing that blame is the opposite of personal responsibility. You're not responsible for my life. I am. But we don't do enough education and training to teach people these things. It's like the depths of personal responsibility, when you really start to explore it, are so exciting. That's where freedom lies. Freedom lies in your level of personal responsibility. It's quite extraordinary. But also it means that you've got to keep your agreements. And the next part about this that I wanted to talk about is building our own moral compass. And you see, back in times where people lived in smaller communities, everybody had to do their bit in that community to contribute to the overall safety and welfare and well-being and happiness of the group. So there was a lot of giving, and it was just part of our life, of giving of ourselves to make those contributions. And when we didn't give, either we felt it ourselves or somebody would correct us, and we would get better and better at learning how to do the right thing when it's necessary. And sometimes doing the right thing can be frightening because you're going against the flow of what everybody else thinks. But in your heart, this is not right. I need to do this. But see, in our cultures, in our wealthy cultures, in our fast-paced cultures, the importance of developing a strong moral compass has gone right down the ladder. And it's way behind how big's your house, how many new outfits have you bought in the last month, how do you look, how's your hair, all that sort of stuff, I'm not saying those things aren't, they're fun, but the reality is, when I go to bed at night and I look back over my day, what I want to know is, have I been a decent person today? And did I evolve a little bit? That's where we've got to put the value back in those things. So then we start to live our lives from our own strong ethics, and we have the courage to live by those. Then when we get into that place, nothing can hurt us because we're conducting our life in our own terms. It's so significant. Yeah, but and this is mentors, and you see now it gets to the point where it's gotten so wacky that if somebody does do the wrong thing and you come to them and you want to help them learn about that and you try to have a conversation, they come back with the two most powerful words that exist in corporate Australia and corporate America right now. They're words of profound domination and control. And those two words are, I'm offended, you know?
And sometimes people use that as a weaponization
You bet.
because they're
That's what I
blaming.
mean.
Yeah, they're blaming as opposed to taking personal responsibility. You know, I took some notes as you were speaking, and the last point that you made about this moral compass and building moral compass made me immediately think of, I don't know if you've seen this documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Blue Oceans, but the
No, I
gentleman,
haven't.
it's very interesting. He travels around all over the world to all these different, very remote areas. And his whole, purpose is to interview and speak to centenarians. So persons who are over 100 or 100 or approaching 100 years old, to look at what's the golden keys. And in each of the communities, and there's one in Japan, in China, there's one in California. They're in very unique
Oh,
places
it's
all over the
Dan.
world.
It's Dan Buettner.
Yes, 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 yes.
Oh, I know Dan very well. He's
Okay,
he's a
okay.
beautiful, beautiful man. Yeah,
It's amazing. But in each
yeah.
of those communities, there is a moral fiber that people live by in terms of how they take care of themselves and taking personal responsibility for their actions and the things that they do. So as soon as you said that, I was like, you know what? That's that whole blue ocean philosophy that people have to be willing to do that. But besides that, you also noted, and I'm hoping everybody caught these gems because John gave some wonderful gems, the fact that we also have to take personal responsibility for our freedom and building that into your well-being mantra of your organization. That was beautiful, John. I love the idea that you mentioned about having these honorable agreements. So you have to do what you say you're going to do and then do those things. I call that communicate. If you don't communicate, then you can't assume that everybody knows what's going on with you. And then finally, the idea of starting to look at creatively about what the work week structure looks like. Like we've just totally redone our work week structure here at Everybody's for our team to see what works in a very remote environment. But the 4-day work week that you introduced, starting to have that conversation. And I think what's really interesting, everyone, hopefully you noted this, is that not one time did he talk about a tactic. He didn't talk about fitness class. He didn't talk about a yoga class. He didn't talk about a product like a Fitbit. He didn't talk about an app like a Calm. He didn't talk about any of those things. He talked about basic pillars of human interaction and experience. And I think when it comes to the workplace experience, if you start with that design ideal in mind, anything that you layer on top of it is going to be a success because it really depends upon people being willing to take accountability and take advantage of those things. So, John, I could talk to you all day long. You are really a book of wisdom. This has been so phenomenal. So I'm going to say this is part 1. We're definitely going to do a part 2 at some point when you move on. So John shared that he's moving on to a new role at GWI very soon and passing the torch. What's going to be the new role again, John?
I'm going to start 2 new initiatives. One will be men's well-being, and the other one will be well-being in sport. So we really want to sort of drive those areas and grow awareness and grow contributions and really get some really good conversations happening. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, and I'd love to interview you once you come on over to this next side. I'm a former athlete myself. I've interviewed quite a few athletes here at the Optimized Workplace. One recent gold medalist. So go back. I'm not going to tell you who. You got to go back and take a look at the interview. But so I'm very interested in how well-being can be incorporated into sports, because just because you're a great athlete, elevated to the highest level, doesn't mean that you have great well-being and that you're in the best mindset of having good mental health. So I think that would be a phenomenal discussion. John, thank you so very much.
Pleasure, friend. Absolute pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us today for this episode of the Optimized Workplace. If you've enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to subscribe and listen to us on your favorite podcast station. And remember, as I always tell you, it's many and that small monumental moments that make the biggest difference in your workplace experience. I'm Fran. Take care, everyone.